All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to the fifth webinar of the 2025 Innovation in Motion webinar series. Thank you for joining us today. Today's webinar focuses on how PennDOT is leading the way in asset management by implementing and developing innovative systems to maintain and improve the conditions of Pennsylvania's roadways and bridges. My name is Jacqueline Huss with PennDOT's Bureau of Strategic Business Operations, and I'm your moderator for today's session. Before we get started, I want to review a few important housekeeping items. All attendees are muted during this webinar session. If you need closed captioning, please click More toward the top of your screen and choose Language and Speech to select Show Live Captions. A question-answer period will follow today's presentation. If you have any questions during today's session, please open the chat feature toward the top of the screen. One professional development hour will be awarded for attending today's webinar. If you would like to receive the PDH credit, please click on the link in the chat box to complete the survey and submit your information. Before we begin, please be advised that this session is being recorded. If you ask a question or comment in the chat box during the session, please note that by doing so, you are consenting to the recording, retention, and use of your statements recorded as part of this session. I'd like to kick things off with introducing our speaker for today. Justin Bruner, Chief of the Bridge Asset Management Section in PennDOT's Bureau of Operations, will show the necessity for asset management, requirements, accomplishments, and what's next in pursuing this initiative. Welcome, Justin. Thanks for being with us today. Let's get started.
Hello everyone, welcome to an Innovation in Motion webinar series. This is Why Asset Management, the Evolution of Asset Management in Transportation. I'm Justin Bruner, PennDOT's Asset Management Engineer. So today I'll be walking you through what is asset management, why we have it, and where we're going with it. So let's dive right in. First, what is asset management? Well, FHWA describes it as a strategic and systematic process for managing, operating, and improving physical assets. The goal is to achieve and maintain a desired state of good repair over the asset's entire life cycle at the minimum practicable cost. Well, it's a little wordy, it's a little vague, and they taught me a new word, practicable. That's cool. I think it could be expanded upon though a little bit. The Institute of Asset Management defines it as coordinated activity of an organization to realize value from assets. Well, I think they're doing a better job there. I kind of understand what they're driving at. Here at PennDOT, we've described it as the right treatment at the right time. Now that sounds like it hits home a little bit better for me. I really like that. It really resonates with what we're trying to do. Select the right treatment at the right time. Great. That sounds like asset management. But I think we need to get into a little bit more of like the context behind asset management. So let's just take a look at this here. My colleagues and I have often discussed asset management as a three-legged stool. So fundamentally, asset management, or selecting that right treatment, is one of the three legs of the stool that basically support performance management. So the correct treatment, or asset management, understanding how to prioritize those treatments is the concept of risk management. So which bridges are more risky than others, which pavements are more risky than others, which pieces of infrastructure support our overall transportation network more than others. That's our concept of risk. And that's tied together with performance-based programming. So what that means is if we make these decisions, what does our outcomes look like? Are we going to have better performance, i.e. percentage of good, fair, poor is better or worse in the future? So these are the three legs of that concept of performance management. And performance management supports the capital program and maintenance and operations. So in theory, this is probably the best description we can use for asset management overall and how it tends to fit within an organization. So let's dive into the asset management concept some more. So back in 2013, FHWA had published some information on this, and it was pretty helpful. They had been pushing this particular graphic for a really long time. I remember being in a job trailer in the late 90s looking through some articles, and this was there at the time. They had pushed strenuously that a 40% drop in quality at 3/4 of its life could be addressed quickly and cost effectively, hence the whole dollar renovation. They didn't call it preservation back then, they called it renovation. But the point was to instill a concept of hit it before it gets too bad. Because a few years later, right, you see another 40% drop in quality over time, but the duration is much shorter. So it ends up costing you $5 more for only a few more years. I appreciate what they're trying to get across here, but that can get a little muddy, a little confusing when you start to think about that in terms of more complex scenarios. So there's better ways of looking at this. And since then, they've come up with better graphics. So really it's talking about this concept of deterioration, which is, let me get my pointer here, this black line here. We talk about deterioration over time. And we talk about the concept of trade-off, doing an overlay versus reconstruct. So this is a much better graphic to represent these trade-off analysis that we tend to do. Noting the overlay would probably cost less, give you slightly less condition. If you wait and reconstruct, it would cost more, but give you better condition. So I applaud them for, advancing this a bit, but really it wasn't until later, and I'll discuss why in a little bit here, but it wasn't until later we really started to get into looking at how we really think of things in terms of deterioration and cost. So from 2022, this is straight out of our Transportation Asset Management Plan, our TAMP. This is a graphic that we had designed to try to communicate that better. I feel as if this does a better job of saying what really happens. You can do no treatment and it degrades over time. You can do these light series of preservations, and if you stop, it will still degrade over time. Or you can do a heavy preservation at a correct time and it will continue out further, right? So you get the concept here. I think this is a great way of communicating this, but since then I've seen something that's actually much better. And that is from Plano, Texas. These guys have their stuff together. Now we're talking about a much more dynamic curve, which is probably a little exaggerated, but it works well for the concept of the overall here. So fundamentally, we have these concepts of preventative maintenance, so short, quick maintenance operations that keep the condition of this pavement in good condition for little dollars. We also have the concept of rehab and the cost associated with it and how much it provides over time. You'll see that the first rehab brings it up to near condition A. The second rehab doesn't quite bring it to condition A. That's a really important point. So you do have the concept of early preventative maintenance for not a lot of money, or waiting. Sometimes you don't have the money to do these preventive maintenance bits. Sometimes your money's all tied up, so you have to wait. And doing a rehab, right? And then possibly performing a second rehab. You can compare those decisions to reconstruction at almost 12 million bucks a mile. And you can see down here that the pavement has nearly failed and they're saying they need to reconstruct, right? And it brings it up to excellent condition again. But from an investment standpoint, that probably isn't the best thing to do, because if we look at things in time, right, let's just look at things right here. What's it cost? Now, one of the shortcomings of these guys in Plano is that they didn't extend this out one more maintenance cycle, actually probably 1.5. You would see that if they just did maintenance the entire time, it would probably leave them somewhere here in the same condition as the rehab. So let's just call it 4 maintenances, right? That would be 400,000 bucks to get to a condition right about here. Similarly, at this point in time, you have to do 2 rehabs, right? And you're still in B condition, right? But that was $4 million, so 10 times the cost. So definitely maintenance is a better deal. And if you compare that to reconstruction at the same time, which puts it in better condition, but not significantly better, right? It's 12 million. So depending on how you're comparing that, right, that's up to what, 6 times more, which is a lot. So the point here is that early and well-timed maintenance activities really stretch your dollar and keep your conditions in good condition. But the problem is you have to be able to calculate a cost benefit for each one of these, and that's a little difficult. So that's where we get into this concept of asset management, right? So we need to identify the eligible treatments. What can we do? Yeah. Determine the treatment impacts, calculate those costs, select the best cost benefit for both, then do that for all the applicable assets. So every piece of road, every bridge, every other piece of infrastructure that you're managing and spending money on. And then you have to prioritize that through some type of risk framework. So that's kind of the core of asset management. And this is not new to just PennDOT or transportation in general. The Institute of Asset Management actually has come up with a flow chart for this because it's so common in industry. So for us anyway, at a DOT, we typically tend to stay in this area right here. So in the concept of asset information, asset decision making, strategy and planning, right? So that 3-legged stool I was talking about, not these 3 points, but it's getting close. So one thing I wanted to call out here in the IAM's diagram is that it may not follow what we at PennDOT do specifically, but they do understand and recognize the impact of legislation. So this is what I was alluding to earlier. So if we just take a look at this slide here, we're talking about the annual cumulative federal spending on highways and transit. So we look at this over time and say, yep, we spent a lot of money on roads and transit. Great. But the important part to kind of keep in mind and focus on is actually down here. From ICE-T through Safety Lou, all program driven, as in you couldn't get any maintenance dollars programmed from the federal government under those spending plans. It was nearly impossible. It was the onus was placed on the state to provide all maintenance for the federal level assets. That completely changed with MAP 21. MAP 21 was the first funding bill that came out with the concept of lowest life cycle cost, so back to that right treatment at the right time, and focused on maintenance and preservation instead of capital expenditure. So we've been at this for a little over 10 years, and we're just now seeing the benefits of some of that decision making. But it's really important to keep this in mind that, we talk about the condition of our overall infrastructure, right? And we're like, oh man, we could have done a lot better. Things are definitely deteriorating. Infrastructure decays at a fairly predictable rate. And we see how that rate changes with appropriate maintenance. And we have in the past been able to actually identify the shortcomings of this type of legislation and be able to show how much more we can get with current conditions using this new lowest life cycle cost methodology. So now we talk about why. So why are we going to do all this? Well, PennDOT has a lot of stuff. We have many transit systems. We have railroads, we have ports, we have airports, right? There's 102 billion, 100.2 billion annual vehicle miles traveled, which is a lot. So for the context of this, we're going to stay in the top row here in that 40,000 miles of roadway and the 25,400 structures and the dollars we invest annually in those. So we try to make our decisions based off of the overall conditions of our assets. So we collect information annually. In simple terms, it's much more complex than that, but in simple terms, we do annual collection of data for our roads and our bridges. And we get a lot of information. There's so much so that we actually publish information specifically for the bridges. We put this out on the internet quarterly for our BMS2 report, and we actually make a publication of our highway data. So there's just tons and tons of summary data that's put out there every year, and it's really hard to make decisions off all of that data. To further complicate things, it's not just the condition of the asset. Here's a quick graphic of bridges built per year. So it's not just the bridge conditions, it's also their age. So as you can see here, we have a lot of bridges. They've been built over the course of the last 150-ish or so years. Although, fun fact, I think we do have the oldest bridge, highway bridge in the country. It's the Pennypack Bridge in Philadelphia. I think that was the late 1600s, maybe early 1700s. Could be wrong. Anyway, we have a lot of stuff. A lot of it's old. Back in here, a lot of this is old. And fun fact here, let's see where we at. This particular high point right here, right? That was the result of an election. Governor Pinchot getting elected, right? His one of his planks was to get the farmer out of the mud. So that's when Pennsylvania took over a lot of rural municipal roadways and bridges. Other ones here highlights World War II. And then this particular highlight here was the conclusion of our 558 bridges in our P3 program. But anyway, as you can see, there's a lot of stuff here, and there's a lot of information that goes with it. So we need to make decisions on this, right? We sum all this information into one statement, right? Good, fair, and poor. What are our conditions right now? This is more simply discussed through bridges, so we'll stick with bridges for a little bit here. But basically we're saying, all right, the condition of our assets, we boil that all down to how many good do we have? How many fair do we have? How many poor do we have? Well, that's good to know. It lets us know where we're at currently, but also like it would be helpful if there was some context to it. So what we try to do is communicate that with the context of time. So we talk about where we are right now, right? End of year, and where we have been previously. So it looks like trending, we're doing a really good job. We're reducing that overall number of poor, which is good. We're increasing our good, which is also good. Our fair is dropping, I would say steady state, also good. But we can also tell that the increase in good and corresponding decrease in poor is likely because of a heavier replacement schedule. Now, as we project out into the future, we can say that continuing to replace is probably not the best investment strategy if you prioritize just replacements. Because long term, that tends to produce less beneficial results, right? Replacement only is not the best investment, right? It's not lowest life cycle cost. So we have to get better at how we invest and those decisions that we make to ensure that we're the best stewards of the infrastructure. So that allows us, or these systems allow us to look at different scenarios. So we know where we've been. Yep, we see where we've been here. This is count, I believe. Yep, we're doing good. And we can say, look, here's where we are right now. Here's where we will be based on our current investment schema, right? And here's where we could be if we increased our investment. I think in this particular example, it was doubling our investment, right? Which is a lot of money, but it also drives down significantly our overall poor. So that's good. And it's good to be able to project that and talk about that because, money is limited and we have to be good stewards of those limited dollars. So now let's talk about how we do that. This is the fun part. So let's talk about the asset management maturity model. We're going to go from no system to the automated system. This is pretty good. This is actually based off of a talk I gave at TRB earlier this year. Because each state is in a different level of this, right? So all the states get together and talk every year about what they're doing and what successes and failures they're having and making better choices in their investments. So most of us started out at level 1, including PennDOT. Back in 2012, yep, here we go. Back in 2012, we did this thing called the governor's performance measures, right? And the governor's office was requiring us to forecast where we would be in the future based on our current investment levels in terms of number of bridges and poor condition and fair condition, all this fun stuff, right? And one of my first assignments at PennDOT at the time was use my trusty HP calculator and crank this out. And I think it took about 2 weeks to generate those numbers. Because remember, at the time, spreadsheets were limited in the amount of information you could store. They were only just so big. I think it was 1.9 gigs or so total size. Anyway, it's a long time ago. And the point being is it was more efficient to run it through a calculator than it was to do a spreadsheet at the time. So that was a lot. And anytime there was a change in budget or a change in conditions, it was really hard for the person to kind of calculate and figure out what that impact really was. So this was the impetus to say, hey, look, we need a system. So step two is those basic systems, right? These are readily available for PennDOT in the bridge area. We started with what we called BAMS Lite. So this is an Excel sheet. Again, I know the limits of Excel because we tried to build this model in Excel. It was pretty good for its time. Um, I think that there were, at one point in time, we were using 4 or 5 different computers, and they would run for upwards of a week to calculate the end results. So that was a really unique time here at the DOT. You would have multiple computers running, and sometimes someone would touch them. You would lose your scenario, and it would be terrible, but it was fun. Um, Building and operating these systems made us realize that we actually needed a more robust and commercial system. And at the time, Pavements actually had purchased a commercial off-the-shelf system to do that. So in the bridge side, we were very jealous, and we decided that we needed something that was an advanced system like everyone else. So for level 3, those advanced systems, these are commercial type enterprise level systems. And here at PennDOT, we decided that we were going to build our own BAMs instead of buying one, largely because of the work that we had done previously with that BAMS Lite system and understanding what exactly we were looking for out of a system, right? Most commercial systems were built by programmers to sell to state DOTs, and they'd never really bothered to get into a DOT and figure out how the DOT operated. So most of the systems really struggle to understand the concepts of what we refer to as flavors of money, or even more simply, deterioration modeling. Most commercial systems offer a Markovian or Weibull deterioration, which means they're doing probabilities. Like this bridge will probably deteriorate from a 6 to a 5, somewhere between 2026 and 2032. Well, for us, that's not really helpful. We need what we refer to as deterministic deterioration modeling. We need to understand when a bridge is going to transition from condition 6 to condition 5. We need to know that year specifically, or within the best. Uh, you want to make it as accurate as possible. So what we ended up doing was building our own system. We originally called it Bridge Care, but we since rephrased to BAMS because we realized that as we were building it, we wanted to make sure that it was available to use for any type of asset, right? So fundamentally, we did nothing more than create a ginormous commercial calculator, right? So it uses BMS2 data, SAP, MPMS, brings it all in, does all these great calculations, and spits out those condition forecasts, those financial needs, that business intelligence that we were looking for. And we want to make sure that it was asset agnostic. So we went with an asset Fox label. So here is a version, I think this is 3.2.3. So this is not the latest, but it's pretty close. This is the commercial, what everyone logs into right now. This is our Asset Fox platform. And as you can see, it is enterprise grade in that we have the ability to have administration, and then it is quite powerful in that you can do a lot of stuff, right? So we can change the analysis method from no spending to until conditions are met, until you reach your budget, all these different things you can do. The investments, right? So we can change and create as many budgets as we want, because fundamentally the concept here is being able to emulate our business process. The more faithfully you emulate that business process, the better off your results are. So we have the ability to put in as many budgets as you want in all practical terms. We have deterioration modeling. We do a really complex bit of deterioration modeling. And then for treatments, you can add in any treatment that you want and its consequences. So if you do this, something happens to that piece of infrastructure. So I'm not going to run down all of this, but know that this is just a really powerful platform that allows us to manage our infrastructure. And like I said before, the AssetFox platform is really, it's currently being used for both bridges and pavements, but it can be applied to lights or buildings or ITS equipments or signs or guide rail or geotech. Great. Okay, so fundamentally, the outputs behind this are just as complex as the system itself. The really important thing I want to make here is that for every bridge, there is a recommended treatment per year for every year of the analysis. So that's important. That's the level of detail that we need, but it also makes these output sheets really crazy complicated. You know, there's just, I don't say unwieldy, but there's a lot of data there because you have to produce a lot of data to actually answer these questions. We try to simplify it, right? So in the output sheet, there is summary tabs that show work done per year. But the reality is that it's a lot. Good detail, good information. We break it down. I specifically used a no spending run here so that we wouldn't have any dollars shown, but just to show that we actually look at and calculate those dollars for just about every work type and slice and dice it every way so we see where those dollars are being invested. So this is an auditable system, which means you can go back and trace every decision the system has made, where the dollar has went, and why. That's really important. It's really important to our end users to understand and have faith in that, because really, if you're trying to rely on a black box, that's probably not a good idea. So the ability to understand where your information is coming from, to be able to validate those calculations, is really, really important. Okay, so now let's talk about interconnected systems. This is where it gets interesting. So like we said before, there is a lot of information and it's very detailed. And it takes a while to understand what it's trying to tell you, right? So there's a learning curve here that has to happen with the output sheet. And that's okay. That's a requirement of what we're trying to do overall for large-scale performance-based management, but there's probably better ways of communicating this information. So we have our BAMS system, right? And that produces that big bridge output. We also have PAMS that produces the pavement output. This is the AssetFox platform. So BAMS, PAMS, they're both same thing. If we ever do a installation for managing, say, trucks, there'll be a truck version of this. Great. These systems can be used to then export information to something that people can use, which would be Project Builder, right? And Project Builder allows both BAMS and PAMS information to be consumed, because remember, the AssetFox outputs are recommended treatments. Yeah, Project Builder creates projects. So you have to move those treatments back and forth in time. So let's say BAMS is recommending a treatment in 2032, but we're going to be paving there. PAM says we need to pave there in 2026. So we either need to slide the pavement ahead to 2032 or bring the bridge work back to 2026. And that's what Project Builder does. Does a bang up job of that and produces a draft step that someone can go in and look at. Great. Makes that information a lot more usable. So keep in mind, bottom section here, AssetFox, that's the standard name for it. Top section, Project Builder. Great. So here's the landing page for our Project Builder platform. So similar layout as before. You can see we have our BAMS and our PAM systems. They feed into Project Builder. Decision space feeds into this. We'll get to this in a second. And ultimately that spits out to the mapper. So let's talk about the mapper for a second. This is really where most people will start and use the BAMS and PAMS information. We're in the process of rolling this out. We just went to PennDOT servers, I think early last week. That's a really big step in the IT process. It takes a long time, a lot of effort to get to DOT servers. And once you hit DOT servers, it's pretty quick to go from development to system test to production. So we're hoping to hit production here soon with this. I would say Halloween. At any rate, Project Builder itself consumes all that information, displays it on the map. You're able to look at things by year, by project type, or by district. So if we just take a look at a sample project here, we see that on Route 81, they're recommending a treatment, right? Crack seal. The person who's looking at this and reviewing it can click and drag on these icons, move it back or forth in time, and ultimately it ends up changing costs and including different treatments if there are different recommended treatments within the system. If I was to click down here, it'd show a great big list of all the specific treatments that were required and the costs, and you're able to edit all that fun stuff, and then that information is dumped back into Project Builder, which is then shared with BAMs and PAMs to produce your 12-year forecast for condition. So exciting stuff. We look forward to rolling that out with everyone here shortly. And then finally, let's talk about decision support system. So this is where it gets interesting. Remember, our BAMs and our PAMs systems, right? They function on known assets. So there's no way to include new assets within that. So that's where we realize that we need something like decision space to help us quantify and determine what should be included in a new program. So here's just a quick shot of this. We're not nearly as close, I should say not nearly. We're a little bit further behind in decision space than our project builder because this is technically a module of it. But here's just a basic work candidate detail. I think this is a potential bike ped. So you can see there's a cost for all these different bits here, and then it has a score for safety, mobility, accessibility, resilience, and all the different items that we've identified that new infrastructure would meet. So the point behind this is to enter in a proposed upgrade, so something that doesn't exist, an upgrade, a proposed new asset, something that doesn't exist in our system, and then it can quantify the details behind that and see if there's a cost benefit for it. So if we were to look at this in a different way, we could say that if, for example, we wanted to add a new lane on the interstate, and let's say that was project 70 here, new lane on the interstate, and it resolved a series of safety problems. You can see a huge impact to this overall safety score. So that would likely be something that would be considered and incorporated within the overall project selection process. Conversely, if you were to add a new lane on the interstate and it was just, say, for future development, right? It's much more likely to be down here in 91 or 16 where it's not really addressing the safety or resilience, you're just doing it for a cost benefit. And overall, while cost benefit is a really great thing, it may not improve any of your core scoring, and therefore it may not rank high on the selection process. So to just start to wrap this up a bit, to keep in mind, performance management is largely held up by the asset management, there's performance-based programming, and the risk management. So we talked about asset management in general and how we look at our each individual asset and how we provide recommended treatments for those. Touched a bit on the risk management, so those treatments are selected based off of different criteria. And that wraps up with our performance-based programming, which is to say, hey, where are we in the 12-year projection as to our overall condition in good, fair, and poor? That is the sum of performance management, and that should support our capital program and maintenance and operations. We do that through our series of systems, our BAMs, our PAMs, our project builder, and our decision space. And these are the type of pieces of information that we produce. We call this actionable intelligence, saying, hey, if you add more dollars to this program, you can get better results or worse, depending on your investment level of specific asset classes. So with that, I'll take a pause here and take any questions.
All right, thank you, Justin, for your presentation and providing an informative look at how PennDOT is leading the way in asset management by implementing and developing innovative systems to maintain and improve the conditions of Pennsylvania's roadways and bridges. Now we would like to hear from you. our audience members. If you have any questions for Justin Bruner and Hallie Cole, please enter it via the chat box. Anya Walker from the Bureau of Strategic Business Operations will read them. While we are waiting for the questions to come in, please direct your attention to the chat box. If you'd like to be awarded 1 PDH credit for your participation today, please click on the link and complete the short survey. Now back to the questions. Anya, what questions do we have in the chat?
All right. I think we're still waiting on some questions. Some said thanks for this webinar, Justin, and they have no questions, but 2 just came in. Regarding bridges, are there any more data points or insights around the state of bridges that your systems don't collect but would be extremely helpful? And if so, what would that help with?
Ooh, great question. Okay, so right now we are limited to our overall inspection program, and it's a very robust program, so I very much appreciate it. But to be honest, we are programmatically limited in our ability to look at element level data. So right now we don't have enough data. The rules have changed regarding inspection the last couple of years. So really it allows for the quantification of defect. That's really helpful for us in the future to be able to actually quantify, say, the square footage of patching or quantify the area in which a beam is deteriorated. So I think that'll really help us in the future. But right now we're sort of in a holding pattern because we need history of data to actually implement that information. So you don't want to create a series of rules, treatments, consequences, decisions in general based off of 1 or 2 inspection cycles, because that would potentially lead to erroneous decisions. So we're looking for some history, in simple terms, we're looking for some history here before we implement that. A great question.
Thank you. Moving on down here, when are all of the systems likely to be available for general use?
Another great question. So I think this brings up a point that we had heard last week at Planning Partners, in that we need to be more communicative in our training schedule. So we felt that training the training's been available for people, but the publicly available concept of training, we haven't done a great job of communicating that. So at this time, I think I'll have someone put our email in the chat, and for anyone who's interested in training, we can reach out to Hallie or myself, and we can provide that individualized training, or let's call it a unit-based training that anyone would want.
And then we're also working on a more robust training rollout schedule at this time.
Correct. So the official, I want to say this, rollout schedule has yet to be determined, but if you're looking for the individual-based training, we've done that for a while now, and is available upon request.
I'm going to pull your emails and put them in the chat, but I'm going to ask you one more question before that, and that's, what's the plan for AI implementation?
Oh, good question. Well, I would say that our Asset Fox platform is probably not a really good candidate for AI at all, because getting back to that concept of auditable system, right? You want to be able to track those decisions, right? And AI doesn't necessarily lend to this concept of tracking. However, I feel that in the very near future, when we are allowed as a DOT to explore that, I do think that the project builder system could benefit from some AI incorporation, because I think it would be able to see some decisions, parallels, just be able to make take more information into account, not necessarily in the same type of format, and just be able to provide us with some better decisions in the future. I really think about AI models. It is a possible to actually have a scenario run, actually then use an AI model to ask the AI questions about the scenario. I really think that's probably one of our more likely outcomes for AI in the immediate future. So I think that would be really beneficial for the end user. That plain language discussion about, hey, tell me about the plan for this bridge, or what do you think about this piece of roadway, and then be able to sort through that budget answer.
Right. I did put both of your emails into the chat, so if you're interested in training or more information, feel free to reach out to Justin and Hallie. And then I also put in the link to PennDOT's asset management portal.
Excellent, thank you.
And then we do have a couple more questions here. Is there an example of what an automated system looks like, and are other DOTs at the level 6?
So I'm not aware of anyone else having an automated system in general. I think most large DOTs are on the cusp of getting to that automated system, or on the cusp of implementation. Again, so we're talking, how would I say this? When we get together, and most of my colleagues and I discuss the status of our systems, what we're trying to do. I feel as if PennDOT is currently on par with everyone else in terms of development and implementation. The concept of lowest life cycle costs, asset management, has been around now for a decade. And as we see greater interest and, say enforcement, but this has become more and more important to our federal partners, which I completely appreciate, right? They're looking to see what they're getting for their dollars for best. So as this becomes more important to them, I feel as if people are stepping up their game and trying to utilize it to both make better decisions and show the impact of their decisions in the future. Missing something.
If other DOTs are at level 6.
But as a side note, PennDOT's currently in the process of going pooled fund. So we're actually looking to partner with a number of other DOTs to provide our platform to them. We're all going to go on this together, because most smaller DOTs have suffered the same pains we have, and are looking to utilize our efforts in this area. So they feel as if we've done a good job at trying to solve this particular problem.
Thank you. Do you think this can be applied to other lines of business, such as aviation?
I do. Anything that deteriorates, right, and has a series of decisions to it, so, treatments and consequences, it can absolutely be applied. So just in simple terms, you can apply this to buildings or runways or the entire airport infrastructure.
Okay. And are other PennDOT asset types, other than bridges and pavements, so it kind of goes along with the question before, being actively built into asset funds? And if so, who is coordinating building other asset types into asset funds?
So we have not officially done anything yet. We've been largely focused on the asset management, bridge and pavement side of this. We have had discussions internally about using it for other things within the Bureau of Maintenance, or Bureau of Operations, sorry. I think that there isn't any overall coordination to that yet, because it hasn't happened. But I'm glad to talk with anyone who's interested in utilizing the Asset Box platform for maintenance of their assets.
Right. So Dennis Neff, feel free to reach out to Justin. Can this application be used to know the condition and the resources required to maintain the structures on a real-time basis?
Real time, great question. Okay, so I wouldn't say real time. Our inspection data for bridges comes in every quarter, but some bridges aren't inspected on that quarterly cycle. We just update it that way. So real time would lend itself to the concept of sensorization, and that's not what this is about. So this is about aggregation of existing inspection data. You could modify the system if you had enough sensors. You could input the sensor data into there to actually update the conditions within reason. That would give it a bit of bias, but I mean, I guess it's possible. I'm not sure that there would be sure that's a valuable outcome or not. I have to think about that, but it's possible.
All right. Will the metropolitan planning organizations be able to utilize the data from this to plan across the state?
Absolutely. So our Asset Box platform is open to the districts, the MPOs, and the RTOs. They all have a role in it and can utilize it as they see fit.
Wonderful. I think that's all the questions we have in the chat. Oh wait, okay. We do have one more before I send it back to Jacqueline. Have you looked at asset management strategies to ensure proper maintenance of municipally owned traffic signals as a strategy of TISMA?
I can say that we definitely have not, but we'll have to talk to the TISMA folks.
We can refer that question.
Yes.
All right, I think that's all the questions we've received so far. Whenever we send out the recording of the webinar to all attendees, I can make sure to include the link to the portal page as well as your contact information in case there are any follow-up questions. And with that, I'm going to kick it back over to Jack.
All right. Thank you, Anya. We had some great questions today for our panelists. So thank you all for sending those questions over. If you still do have a question that hasn't been answered, you are always welcome to submit your questions to .innovations@pa.gov, and we can work with our panelists to provide responses to your questions following today's webinar. I'd like to thank Justin and Hallie for all of you participating in today's session. We have 2 links in the chat box. The first is a quick feedback survey that we'd like you to complete. The second link again is to request 1 professional development hour for participating in today's webinar. Your feedback is valuable to us and will help us plan for future events. I would also like to remind everyone to look out for the invitation for the next Innovation in Motion webinar, PennDOT's Digital Transformation, on December 9th. Please note that if you already added this to your calendar, the WebEx link is the correct link. If you have any innovative ideas to share for future webinars, we love to hear from you. Please send your ideas to .innovations@pa.gov. Thanks again for joining us today, and we look forward to your participation in future webinars. Have a great day, everyone.